Welcome, weary traveler, to history for the tired. Tonight, as the world outside begins to quiet its ceaseless demands, we invite you to lay down your burdens, ease your mind, and journey with us far, far back in time. Let the gentle currents of the past carry you, not into the whirlwind of grand battles or dramatic pronouncements, but into the quiet, often unromantic realities of daily life. In a distant age, as the soft darkness settles around you, allow your thoughts to drift and find peace in the rhythms of history. Tonight, our journey takes us to the ancient lands of Israel, a landscape woven into the very fabric of human story, yet often seen through a romanticized veil. We'll peel back those layers to uncover the stark, demanding truths of existence in a world far removed from our comforts. We'll begin by imagining exactly what it was like to face the relentless challenges of a life intimately tied to the earth and its creatures. So, breathe deeply, feel the quiet envelop you, and let us begin our gentle descent into the past. Imagine, if you will, the first hints of dawn staining the eastern sky. Not the gentle, diffused light that might filter through modern curtains, but a stark, almost immediate illumination, burning away the last vestiges of the desert night. The air, though still cool, perhaps even crisp, carries with it the dry scent of dust and distant scrub, and a subtle, musky aroma of wool and damp earth. From the huddling flock, you can already feel the promise of the day's heat building, a pervasive warmth that will soon dominate every waking moment. This harsh, undeniable shift from darkness to light is your alarm clock. The ancient, unyielding cycle of the sun, dictated not by choice, but by the relentless needs of your animals. You stir on your rough mat, a simple weave of reeds or a coarse animal hide, laid directly upon the hard, unforgiving earth of your makeshift shelter. Your body aches, a dull throb in your back and limbs from hours spent huddled, perhaps against the night's chill or from the cramped posture you maintained to stay alert, half sleeping. True, deep, unbroken sleep for a shepherd in ancient Israel was a rare luxury. It was a mosaic of brief, cautious rests, perpetually on the very edge of full awareness. One ear always attuned to the rustle of the flock, the distant howl, or the shifting wind. Your first conscious thought, even before any personal comfort, is to survey your flock. The soft, persistent bleating of sheep and the more insistent, reedy cries of goats are the constant underlying soundtrack to your existence. You count them, your eyes sweeping over the huddled forms, searching for any signs of distress, any missing members, any unusual stirring. Each animal represents your family's wealth, your very sustenance, your fragile hold on survival in a challenging world. Their health, their presence, their security is not merely a responsibility. It is, quite literally, your life. A single lost lamb could mean a season of hardship, a decimated flock, utter ruin. As the sun begins its slow, inexorable climb, painting the rugged landscape in shades of ochre, burnt umber, and dusty gray, you prepare for the day's arduous journey. There is no elaborate breakfast, perhaps a small, coarse piece of unleavened bread, baked simply from barley or wheat flour, hardened by the dry air. If you are particularly fortunate, you might have a handful of dried figs or dates, or perhaps a small portion of lentil stew, but this is not a meal to be savored. It is fuel, quickly consumed to begin the day's work. It is life itself in this parched land. It is carefully rationed, carried in a rough leather skin, perhaps made from a goat's stomach, or a sturdy clay jar wrapped in damp cloth. To keep it cool, the nearest well or spring might be hours, even a full day's journey away, and not all sources are reliable or safe. The constant, nagging sensation of thirst, or at least the careful, deliberate management of it, is a familiar, ever-present companion. Every sip is deliberate, a conscious act of preservation. Now, you must lead your flock. This is not a leisurely stroll through verdant, manicured fields. The land, though capable of astonishing fertility in specific valleys or alongside ancient riverbeds, is predominantly dry. Every day is a quest for pasture, for sparse tufts of grass that cling stubbornly to the arid earth among the stones, for thorny shrubs that the resilient goats might browse, and, most critically, for water. You walk, and walk, and walk, covering vast distances under the relentless, often scorching sun. The ground beneath your feet is uneven, dusty, filled with loose scree and sharp, hidden stones. Your sandals, if you even possess such a luxury, offer only minimal protection, barely a barrier against the heat radiating from the ground. Your feet, hardened by years of this endless trek, bear the indelible marks of this demanding existence. Calluses, scars, and the perpetual layer of fine. The physical discomfort, however, is only one layer of the shepherd's profound burden. The wilderness is not empty, nor is it a place of peaceful solitude. It harbors dangers that are very real, very immediate, and often lethal. The distant, mournful howl of a wolf carried on the evening breeze is not a distant, romantic sound. It is a declaration of predatory intent, a chilling promise of attack. The telltale slithering movement in the rocks warns of a venomous snake, a viper or a cobra, whose bite could bring swift, agonizing death far from any help. And perhaps most terrifyingly, there are human threats, raiders from neighboring tribes, opportunistic thieves, or even desperate individuals driven by hunger or lawlessness, seeing your flock as their only chance at survival. Your staff, a sturdy length of wood, is not just a walking aid or a tool for guiding sheep. It is a weapon capable of delivering a crushing blow to a predator, human or animal. Your sling, skillfully wielded, not merely a toy for bored hours, is capable of delivering a lethal blow, launching a stone with surprising accuracy and force. You must be constantly alert, your senses perpetually attuned to every whisper of wind, every unusual shadow, every faint sound that might betray a hidden threat. Your very life and the lives of your flock depend on your unceasing vigilance. Imagine the sheer monotony of such an existence. Days bleeding into weeks, weeks into months, the same cycle of leading, guarding, searching, waiting. The landscape, while at times possessing a stark beauty, could also feel endlessly repetitive, featureless. The loneliness can be profound, a vast, stretching silence punctuated only by the sounds of your flock. Though often you might share the duty with a younger family member learning the trade. Or perhaps another shepherd from a nearby clan conversation might be sparse, practically punctuated by the sounds of the flock, the distant call of a desert bird, or the gentle murmur of ancient prayers whispered under a vast indifferent sky. There are no weekends, no holidays, no designated days of rest in the modern sense. The sheep need you every single moment. When a lamb is born, in the dead of night, in the biting cold, you are its midwife, gently cleaning it, ensuring it suckles, protecting it from the cold. When a falls ill, you are its doctor, applying traditional remedies, praying for its recovery. When an animal wanders off and is lost, a frighteningly common occurrence, you embark on a tireless, often desperate search. For to lose even one means a significant blow to your family's fragile economy. Your ability to feed yourselves, to trade, to survive the coming season. The emotional weight of this responsibility is immense, a silent pressure that underlies every waking hour, a constant, low-level anxiety. The nights bring a different, yet equally demanding, set of challenges. As the sun dips below the horizon, plunging the landscape into a deep, velvety, star-studded blackness, the temperatures drop sharply. You gather your flock into a makeshift fold, perhaps just a rough stone enclosure, or simply huddle them tightly together for warmth, their collective body heat providing a measure of comfort. You light a small fire, not just for warmth, but for protection. Its flickering light, a defiant beacon against the encroaching darkness, a psychological comfort against the unknown lurking just beyond its glow. You might sing quiet ancient songs, or murmur familiar tales, or simply pray in the darkness to keep your mind from the pervasive loneliness and the ever-present dangers. And then you stand watch, often for hours on end, your sleep fragmented, your senses on high alert, the vast canvas of stars above a beautiful yet distant witness to your lonely vigil. This was the rhythm of their lives, a life of relentless physical demand, of constant vigilance, of profound responsibility, and of a deep, intimate, often brutally honest connection to the land and its unpredictable forces. It was a life that few in our modern world, accustomed to comfort, security, and a clear division between work and rest, would endure for even a single day. The shepherd's life was a testament to resilience, a constant dance with survival, and a quiet, unheralded heroism. As the shepherd's demanding day slowly unfolds under the relentless ancient sun, we can begin to appreciate the sheer resilience required for mere survival in this unyielding world. Life, for the common person, was a constant negotiation with the elements, with wild beasts, and with the often unseen currents of human conflict. There were moments of profound drama. Our next story transports us to one such moment, featuring a figure whose journey was as improbable, as rebellious, and ultimately, as dramatically transformative as any found in the ancient annals. It is a tale that takes us from the familiar shores of the Mediterranean to the very edge of the known world, and then to a place of utter, suffocating confinement. Our narrative now shifts from the quiet, dusty hills and the solitary vigilance of the shepherd to the bustling, vibrant, and sun-drenched. Imagine the sensory overload here. The cacophony of 1,000 voices mingling in the air. The sharp cries of fishmonks, the guttural shouts of stevedores loading cargo, the melodic calls of vendors hawking their wares. The pungent scent of salt and drying fish hangs heavy in the air, mixed with the exotic aromas of spices, newly unloaded from distant lands, and the earthy smell of wet rope and timber. The rhythmic lapping of waves against wooden hulls is the city's constant heartbeat, a lullaby to the sailors, and a beckoning call to adventure for some, and for others, an irresistible path to escape. Here, among the bustling merchants, the weather-beaten sailors, and the throngs of travelers seeking passage to distant shores, we encounter a man named Jonah, son of Amittai. He was not, by conventional standards, a figure of great power or renown. He was a prophet, a mouthpiece for the divine, called by a voice that resonated with an undeniable, unyielding authority, and that voice, the very voice of his God, had given him a clear, yet deeply unsettling, command. The words would have echoed in his mind, persistent and unavoidable. Arise, go to Nineveh, and call out against it, for their evil has come up before me. To understand Jonah's profound reluctance, we must briefly consider Nineveh. It was no ordinary city, no mere trading post, or quiet agricultural town. Nineveh was the sprawling, formidable capital of the Assyrian Empire, a power that, at various points in history, and a reign of terror that spread across the ancient Near East, casting a long, chilling shadow over smaller nations like Israel. The Assyrians were infamous for their siegecraft, their mass deportations, and their graphic depictions of conquered foes. For an Israelite like Jonah, Nineveh represented everything antithetical to his people's faith, their safety, and their very existence. To preach repentance to such a city overflowing with violence and idolatry, it was a mission that demanded immense courage, or perhaps, as in Jonah's case, an immense desire to flee. And so, Jonah, a man burdened by a divine calling, he desperately wished to evade, made a very human, very understandable decision. He would run. He would seek the furthest possible point on the compass from Nineveh. His eyes would have scanned the harbor, searching for any vessel heading west. He sees a ship preparing to sail, its single mast reaching skyward, its canvas furled, not towards the east and the dreaded Assyrian heartland, but west, far across the vast expanse of the Great Sea, towards Tarshish, a distant port city, perhaps in modern-day Spain, was for the ancients a symbol of the very edge of the known world, a place of ultimate escape, a remote sanctuary where one might believe themselves. Finally, beyond the reach of divine command, he haggles for his fare, a sum that might have represented a significant portion of his meager possessions, a desperate investment in a new, unburdened life. With the transaction complete, he descends into the ship's belly, seeking anonymity among the cargo, the crates filled with trade goods and the creaking, groaning timbers of the vessel. The scent of salt and tar, the gentle rocking of the vessel as it prepared to set off, the distant, mournful cries of gulls. All might have promised a deceptive sense of peace, a brief illusion of freedom. He finds a dark, quiet corner amidst the ship's hold, an obscure space where he could succumb to a deep, weary sleep, attempting to forget the unfulfilled mission to to quiet the insistent whisper of his conscience. The ship sets sail. The ropes strain. The sails unfurl with a snap, and the vessel begins to cut through the blue waters, pushing it further and further from the shores of Israel, from the echoes of that divine voice. For a time, Jonah might have felt a fleeting sense of relief, a brief, precarious respite from the immense pressure of his calling. The vastness of the open sea stretched before them, seemingly endless, a barrier between him and his unwanted destiny. But the vastness of the sea, often a symbol of freedom and boundless possibility, soon turned into an instrument of divine will. A great storm, violent and sudden, descended upon the ship. Not just a squall, a passing tempest, but a cataclysmic upheaval of nature. A gale of such furious intensity that even the seasoned mariners, men whose lives were spent battling the vagaries of the sea, waves as tall as mountains crashed over the deck, deluging the ship with tons of frigid water. The ship groaned and shuddered, its ancient timbers straining, threatening to splinter and break apart under the relentless assault. The cargo, the very livelihood of the crew and the merchants aboard, was thrown overboard in a desperate last-ditch attempt to lighten the load and save their lives. Tools, supplies, and precious goods were sacrificed to the churning abyss. Amidst this terrifying chaos, the desperate cries of the terrified sailors rose above the roar of the wind and waves. They cried out to their own gods, each invoking their deity, seeking deliverance from the overwhelming force that threatened to consume them. But no answer came. The captain? A man hardened by countless voyages. For any clue as to why this particular storm was so unnaturally severe, remembers the lone passenger who had fallen into an unnaturally deep sleep below deck. He descends into the ship's rocking belly, shakes Jonah awake, and demands that he, too, call upon his God, believing that perhaps the slumbering man had a deity more powerful or more appeasable. The sailors, a motley crew from various nations and diverse religious beliefs, are baffled. This storm is unlike any they have ever witnessed. They decide to cast lots, a common ancient practice used to discern divine will, to identify the source of misfortune, or to assign blame in times of crisis. They perform the solemn ritual, perhaps with fearful anticipation, and the lot, with chilling certainty, falls upon Jonah. Imagine that harrowing moment. Cold spray lashing your face, the deck pitching violently beneath, your feet in the desperate accusing eyes of strangers. Men whose lives are now hanging by a thread, fixed upon you, demanding an explanation for their imminent demise. The wind howls, seeming to carry their unspoken question. Jonah, standing amidst the chaos, confesses. He tells them he is a Hebrew, and he fears the Lord, the God of heaven, the one who made the sea and the dry land. He admits he is fleeing from his presence, an act of profound disobedience. A new, deeper fear grips the sailors, a terror born not of the storm itself, but of the divine wrath. They now understand. They are caught in. To offend such a powerful deity, one who controls the very elements that now threaten them, is a terrifying prospect. They are reluctant to harm him, to lay hands on a man whose God wielded such immense power. What shall we do to you, that the sea may quiet down for us. They cry out, their voices hoarse with desperation. But Jonah, now fully aware of the gravity of his disobedience and the dire consequences for those around him, understands that only a profound sacrifice can appease the storm. He instructs them, his voice perhaps calm amidst the tumult, resigned to his fate. Pick me up and throw me into the sea. Then the sea will become calm for you. For I know that it is because of me that this great tempest has come upon you. Still, the sailors, despite their fear, are deeply reluctant to take a human life. They try, for one final, futile moment, to row back to shore, straining against the impossible waves, battling the gale with raw human effort. But it is useless. The storm rages unabated, merciless, with heavy hearts, perhaps uttering prayers for forgiveness. As they do so, they comply. They lift Jonah, a figure of profound human defiance and divine judgment, and with a final, desperate prayer, they cast him into the raging, churning waters. The instant Jonah hits the tumultuous waves, the effect is immediate and profound. The storm abates. The wind dies down. The waves subside. And the sea becomes calm. Incredibly, the silence that follows must have been profound, broken only by the gasps of the astonished. Terrified sailors, now utterly convinced of the unparalleled power of Jonah's God, they offered a great sacrifice to the Lord. But Jonah's ordeal was not over. The text tells us, with stark, almost clinical simplicity, that the Lord appointed a great fish to swallow Jonah. This was not a natural event, not a chance encounter with a large marine creature, but a specific, deliberate act of divine intervention, a miraculous containment rather than a violent end. Inside the belly of this immense creature, in the suffocating darkness, surrounded by the stench of the sea, the slimy walls of the creature's gullet, and the terrifying knowledge of being alive, within a living, breathing prison, Jonah spent 3 days and 3 nights. Imagine the profound despair that would settle upon a human soul in such a place. The utter loneliness, the crushing realization of his own powerlessness within that living, moving prison. The oxygen would have been thin, the sounds a muffled, watery roar. He would have been battered by the creature's movements, nauseated by the internal currents. Yet, in that suffocating darkness, stripped of all worldly comfort and hope, Jonah cried out, not just in physical distress, though that would have been immense, but in the depths of spiritual agony. From the belly of Sheol, the grave, he cried for salvation. He acknowledged his folly, his rebellion, and offered a prayer of profound repentance, recognizing that salvation, true deliverance, comes only from the Lord, regardless of where one finds themselves. And after those 3 agonizing days and nights, at the unwavering command of the divine, the great fish vomited Jonah out onto dry land. He was alive, though surely disoriented, smelling profoundly of the sea, weak and utterly, profoundly changed by his ordeal. His escape from the fish was not the end of his journey, but a forceful, undeniable redirection. His original mission, once shunned and fled from, now stood before him again, undeniable. His harrowing, almost surreal experience had stripped away his reluctance, replacing it with a profound, terrifying, and ultimately humbling understanding of divine power and mercy. This tale, seemingly fantastical, speaks to a deeply human experience. This struggle with a calling, the often painful consequences of avoidance, and the profound, transformative power of encountering the unexpected, often uncomfortable, path to one's destiny. It is a narrative that reminds us that sometimes the most extraordinary journeys begin not with willing steps, but with profound missteps, leading to a forced reckoning that ultimately guides us towards our truest purpose. From the dramatic, almost surreal journey of the reluctant prophet Jonah, who faced the profound consequences of divine will, we turn our attention now to the very ground beneath our feet. For in ancient Israel, the earth itself holds countless secrets, whispering stories of human endeavor, monumental change, and enduring mysteries that stretch back millennia. For archaeologists, the dust and rubble of generations past are not mere dirt, but a vast, silent. With meticulous care, they unearth layers of existence, piecing together the daily lives, the beliefs, and even the moments of seismic change that shaped the biblical world. Our next segment invites you to join us in an exploration of those whispers. As we delve into the silent, yet profoundly eloquent, evidence unearthed from the very soil, imagine standing, quite literally, upon a tell. Not a story, not a fanciful tale, but a tell. A man-made hill formed over thousands upon thousands of years by successive generations building, living, and ultimately dying on the very same spot. Each layer of debris, each collapsed mud brick wall, each discarded potsherd, each foundation stone of a forgotten house, represents a distinct chapter in human history, carefully stacked one upon another, preserved by the accumulating dust of ages. In ancient Israel, these tells dot the landscape, like ancient sentinels, silent monuments to vanished civilizations, holding within their stratified depths the echoes of lives long past. And one of the most famous, and perhaps most enigmatic among them, is the Tell of Jericho. For centuries, the story of Jericho, with its walls famously tumbling down at the sound of trumpets and shouts of an invading army, captivated imaginations across cultures and generations. It's a narrative of divine intervention, military might, and the dramatic downfall of a formidable city. But what is the ground itself, the tangible evidence buried for millennia, actually reveal? Archaeologists, with their meticulous brushes, their precise trowels, their patient sifting screens, and their unwavering dedication, approach such sites not to prove or disprove a specific biblical account, but to understand the vast, complex tapestry of human habitation that existed there. They are the ultimate detectives of the past, carefully, painstakingly piecing together the fragmented, often perplexing, clues left behind by the relentless passage of time. As you consider this, try to visualize the physical site of ancient Jericho. It is not, as it is often mistakenly portrayed in popular imagination, a lush, verdant oasis. Rather, it is a strategically vital spot, blessed by the presence of a powerful and consistent spring, the Aini Sultan Spring, which made it an incredibly desirable place for human settlement for many, many millennia. This constant water source, rare and precious in such an arid region, meant that Jericho was a magnet for human activity, a place where life could continuously flourish. Indeed, archaeological excavations of Jericho have revealed an astonishing continuity of human presence, stretching back an incredible 10,000 to the very earliest days of the Neolithic period. This makes it not just oral, but arguably one of the oldest continuously inhabited places on Earth. Long before any biblical narratives were penned. Even before the widespread adoption of pottery, people built and lived here, adapting to their environment, creating early forms of agriculture. Perhaps the most famous archaeological revelation at Jericho concerns its formidable walls. Yes, indeed, there were walls. Not just one, but complex systems of fortifications that evolved and were rebuilt over thousands of years, reflecting the changing threads and architectural prowess of each successive culture. For instance, early Bronze Age Jericho, dating to roughly 3000–2000 BCE, boasted truly immense defenses, including a massive stone retaining wall, perhaps 15 feet high, topped by a mud brick wall, even taller, all fronted by a deep defensive ditch cut into the bedrock. Imagine the sheer, back-breaking human effort required to quarry, transport, and precisely lay the stones for such a massive barrier, layer upon layer, against perceived threats. The sheer scale and enduring presence of these defenses speak volumes about the strategic importance of the city and the constant, Now, consider the profound challenges inherent in archaeology, especially when it intersects with widely held religious or historical beliefs. When archaeologists examine the specific layer corresponding to the time frame often associated with the biblical story of Joshua, Israelite conquest, typically estimated around the late Bronze Age, roughly 1400 to 1200 BCE. The picture becomes incredibly complex and nuanced. Evidence does indeed suggest that a formidable wall system was present during that general period, and there is even compelling evidence of a massive destruction layer, a thick, pervasive stratum of ash-charred timbers and collapsed mud bricks. This is precisely what one might expect from a city that fell dramatically, as described in the biblical account. However, the precise dating of this destruction layer and its definitive correlation to the specific biblical narrative remains a topic of intense scholarly debate among archaeologists and historians. Some interpretations of the ceramic evidence and carbon dating point to a major destruction that may have occurred a century or even 2 centuries before the traditional timing of Joshua's conquest. This discrepancy often leads to differing conclusions among scholars. Some suggest the biblical account is a memory of an earlier, genuine destruction. Others propose that the archaeological evidence is simply not yet fully understood or interpreted, while still others contend that the biblical narrative serves a theological rather than a strictly historical or chronological purpose for this specific event. But do you like more? The beauty and frustration of archaeology lie in this very complexity, but rather a richer, more detailed, and sometimes more ambiguous understanding of the past. But the true beauty of archaeology, for our purposes tonight, lies not in definitively resolving every grand historical puzzle, but in showing us the material realities of the past. It allows us to touch, in a very real sense, the lives of ordinary people It reveals the types of humble pottery people used for cooking their stews and porridges, for storing their precious grain, or for carrying their daily water. It uncovers the simple tools they fashioned from bronze and, later, from iron, sickles for harvesting, hammers for building, needles for sewing. We find the remains of their humble domestic structures. Single-room homes of mud brick, where families lived, cooked, and slept. We even find the preserved seeds and animal bones that tell us precisely what they ate, what crops they cultivated, and what animals they herded. These are the intimate, mundane, yet profoundly moving echoes of ordinary lives, often overlooked in the grand narratives, but utterly essential to understanding the ancient world at its most fundamental level. Think for a moment of the smaller, more personal finds, unearthed from the dusty soil. A simple clay oil lamp, perhaps dropped carelessly by a child thousands of years ago, offers a tangible glimpse into how a family illuminated their small home during the long, deep desert nights, filling the air with the faint scent of burning olive oil. A broken, grinding stone, worn smooth and concave from countless hours of processing grain, barley or wheat, carefully separated from chaff, speaks volumes about the tireless, repetitive labor of women preparing food for their families, day in and day out. Fragments of storage jars, once filled with water, wine, or precious oil, evoke the daily rhythms of sustenance, celebration, and resource management. These artifacts, though broken and unadorned, are powerful conduits to the lived experience of the past. Beyond the walls and pottery, archaeology also richly illuminates the broader cultural and religious practices of the region. Excavations across ancient Israel have uncovered numerous cultic sites, places of worship, both official and unofficial. They reveal the diverse religious practices that coexisted and often conflicted. Archaeologists find small figurines of deities, sometimes foreign gods, like Baal or Asherah. They uncover stone altars for sacrifice, ritual basins for purification, and remnants of votive offerings, all offering invaluable insights into the spiritual landscape, providing a tangible context for the intense religious struggles, the moments of profound devotion, and the instances of syncretism described in the ancient texts. They show us that the religious life was not just abstract belief, but a vibrant, tactile, and often dramatic part of their daily reality. The process of archaeological excavation itself is a slow, deliberate dance with time, a meticulously choreographed uncovering. Imagine the quiet intensity as a team of archaeologists and trained laborers, often working under the blazing sun or the biting wind, layer after layer of soil, sometimes using a shovel for bulk removal, but often resorting to small hand trowels, brushes, and even dental picks for delicate work. Every single detail is recorded with obsessive precision. The exact location of every artifact, the orientation of every stone, the subtle changes in soil color. Every feature is drawn, every significant find photographed and cataloged. It's a process that is, in a profound sense, one of careful destruction. For once a layer is removed, it is gone forever. But the information gained from that careful, systematic removal becomes invaluable, building up a detailed picture of ancient life. It's a patient, methodical pursuit, requiring immense concentration and a deep respect for the past, perfectly suited for a quiet, contemplative unraveling in the mind's eye. And so, the tell of Jericho, a silent witness to millennia of human striving, and countless other archaeological sites across the ancient Near East continue to yield their secrets, layer by silent layer. They remind us that history is not just a collection of stories passed down through generations, but a tangible, physical reality that lies beneath our feet, waiting for patient discovery, offering constant opportunities to reconsider, to deepen, and to broaden our understanding of the human journey. The ground holds the echoes of their footsteps, if only we learn how to listen. From the meticulous work of the archaeologists unearthing the silent echoes of ancient lives, we turn our gaze now from the patient earth to the very living, breathing heart of ancient Israelite society, the seat of power, the royal court. While we often imagine biblical kings primarily through the lens of their grand, religious pronouncements, or their decisive military victories, their daily lives, the intricate web of responsibilities, and the subtle, often dangerous dance of power within their palaces offer a rich and complex tapestry for our exploration. Our final segment for tonight invites you to step inside these sacred yet intensely human spaces and glimpse the surprisingly heavy, often isolating, burden of a crown. Imagine the dawn breaking over ancient Jerusalem, not just over the humble dwellings of shepherds and farmers, but over the burgeoning, strategically positioned royal palace of King David. While perhaps not possessing the colossal grandeur or the sheer scale of the later imperial palaces of Assyria or Babylon, this palace was nonetheless the undisputed center of power, the administrative heart, and indeed a vital, spiritual, and symbolic anchor for a newly unified kingdom. For David, a man whose remarkable journey led him from the dusty, solitary life of a shepherd, a life of enduring hardship and constant vigilance as we explored earlier, to the anointed, revered king, it was a transition from the vast, open fields and quiet contemplation of the wilderness to the bustling, often claustrophobic, confines of a complex and demanding court. Your day, were you to find yourself serving in such a royal court, would begin not with the shepherd's simple, self-prepared meal, but with the intricate, almost ritualistic preparations for the monarch's awakening. Servants moving with quiet, practiced purpose would prepare food in the palace kitchens, perhaps freshly baked soft bread, fragrant with herbs, bowls of succulent fresh fruits, and roasted meats savory and rich, a stark and undeniable contrast to the sparse, rough diet of the common folk outside the palace walls. Water would be carefully drawn from palace wells, or perhaps even brought from a revered spring, and delivered for the king's ablutions, often warmed for comfort. Fragrant oils and expensive perfumes, perhaps imported from distant lands. Every single detail, from the textiles draped on the royal bed to the temperature of the morning water, was designed with meticulous care. Its purpose was not just comfort, but to reinforce the king's elevated status, to project an unshakable image of divinely sanctioned authority, order, and prosperity. But a king's life, despite these outward signs of luxury, was profoundly not one effortless indulgence. His primary all-consuming burden was governance. Imagine the relentless streams of petitioners, advisors, and officials, awaiting an audience from the very first light of morning. Tribal elders, their faces etched with the concerns of their communities, seeking judgment in complex land disputes or personal grievances. Military commanders, their armor perhaps still bearing the marks of recent skirmishes, reporting on border security, or the vital logistics of supplying an army. Palace administrators, meticulous in their presenting reports on tax revenues, agricultural yields, or the management of royal resources. Foreign emissaries, arriving with elaborate gifts and carefully worded messages, seeking alliances or delivering demands from distant empires. David would sit, perhaps, on a simple yet dignified throne, or more likely on a raised, cushioned platform, his posture radiating authority, listening intently, deliberating carefully, and issuing commands. His decisions, whether about a minor dispute between neighbors or a major military campaign, directly impacted the lives, the prosperity, and even the very survival of his entire kingdom. The immense mental toll of such constant arbitration, the unceasing need for wisdom, discernment, and often Solomon-like judgment in every ruling must have been immense. There was no escaping the daily, intricate demands of justice, administration, and leadership. Beyond the immediate sphere of governance, the military aspect of kingship was an ever-present, pervasive reality. David himself, famously a renowned warrior from his youth, understood intimately the constant, swirling threats. Imagine the hushed, intense discussions with his trusted generals and military advisors, strategies for defending the kingdoms, vulnerable borders, plans for proactive campaigns to secure key trade routes or strategic positions, the complex logistics of recruiting a standing army, ensuring their training and morale. Even in times of relative peace, the maintenance of a capable military force, the constant drill, the readiness for swift and decisive conflict were perpetual. The faint clang of distant armorers at work, the sharp, disciplined shouts of training soldiers, echoing from the royal barracks, the rhythmic beat of drums practicing for parade or battle. These would have been constant, subtle reminders of this weighty responsibility, the sheer human cost of war, the lives of his soldiers, and the ultimate security of his people rested squarely and heavily upon his shoulders. And there were the religious ceremonies and obligations. As king, David held a unique, deeply significant, and divinely appointed role. He was not merely a political or military leader, but also, fundamentally, a shepherd of his people's spiritual life, a mediator between God and Israel. Imagine the solemn processions, perhaps escorting the Ark of the Covenant, as David famously did, or the careful, precise rituals of sacrifices offered at the tabernacle, which later evolved into the magnificent temple. The leading of psalms and worship, the participation in annual festivals, the offering of prayers for the nation. These were not optional duties to be casually attended to, but integral, indispensable parts of his daily, weekly, and yearly routine. They were designed to reinforce the sacred covenant between God and his chosen people, and between God and the divinely appointed king. The solemnity of these moments, the expectation of spiritual purity, the weight of representing the entire nation before the divine, added another profound layer of pressure to his public persona, demanding both piety and performance. The family dynamics within the royal court were also a constant source of challenge and often deep personal anguish. Imagine navigating the complex, often fraught relationships with multiple wives, each with their own influential families, each vying for power, for status, for the succession of their sons. Then there were the children, the numerous princes and princesses, some ambitious to a fault, some deeply rebellious, some loyal and steadfast. We know vividly from the biblical accounts of David's life that his own family was often fractured by intrigue, jealousy, rivalries, and tragic conflict. The story of Amnon and Tamar, the rebellion of Absalom, the succession struggles among his sons. The king, despite his immense power and outward authority, was not immune to the heartaches, the betrayals, and the profound personal grief that could tear a family apart. Indeed, in a royal family, these personal dramas were amplified by the immense political stakes of royal succession, the hushed whispers in the palace corridors, the averted glances, the subtle shifts in royal favor from one queen or prince to another. These would have been part of the unseen, yet intensely felt daily drama that played out within the palace walls. Consider the palace itself, not merely as a dwelling, but as a living, breathing, administrative and operational center. Scribes, with their reed pens, scratching meticulously on parchment or papyrus, would be endlessly recording royal decrees, tallying tax revenues from various districts, documenting land grants and legal judgments, keeping detailed records of the royal treasury and supplies. Messengers, often swift runners, would constantly arrive and depart, carrying vital information, requests, and commands across the vast network of the kingdom, from distant border outposts to burgeoning towns. Artisans of every craft would be engaged in ongoing tasks. Skilled stonemasons, repairing or extending royal structures. Weavers, creating luxurious tapestries to adorn the royal chambers. Goldsmiths and silversmiths, crafting fine jewelry or ceremonial objects, shaping intricate furniture. The air within the palace would have been thick with the scent of lamp oil, the dry aroma of parchment, perhaps the rich, exotic perfumes brought by trade, and the savory smells emanating from the busy kitchens. The sounds would be a constant low, yet distinct hum. The repetitive scratch of a scribe's pen, the murmur of consultations, the distant laughter of children echoing through courtyards. The clatter of pottery as meals were prepared and served the faint disciplined commands of guards. Even leisure, when it came, was rarely purely personal or unstructured. For a king, recreation often served a dual purpose: to project an image of strength and well-being, or to foster loyalty and connections. Imagine David listening to music played by palace musicians, perhaps even taking up his own lyre to compose the soulful psalms for which he is eternally famous. Or perhaps he would observe the rigorous training of his elite personal guard, or partake in a royal hunt, all activities that reinforced his image as a strong, capable, and divinely favored leader. Even within the privacy of his chambers, his personal life was rarely truly private. Every action was observed, every word weighed, every mood potentially analyzed by those around him. The weight of his public persona was constant. Finally, there was the constant, pervasive awareness of external threats and diplomatic complexities. Beyond the immediate borders of his kingdom, the looming shadows of larger, more ancient empires. Egypt to the south, the rising formidable power of Assyria to the north, and various city-states and kingdoms across the Levant, posed a silent yet ever-present undercurrent to his daily life. David, in his remarkable reign, skillfully secured his borders, subdued hostile neighbors, and established a formidable regional power, even forming alliances where strategically beneficial. But this required relentless vigilance, diplomatic cunning, strategic foresight, and the unwavering willingness to engage in conflict when necessary. The intelligence reports of foreign movements, the shifting alliances between rival powers, the endless cycle of perceived threat and strategic response, all formed a silent, yet ever-present, pressure on the king's mind, a constant calculation of risk and opportunity. From the humble shepherd boy, leading his flock through the vast, sun-drenched hills, and guarding them from unseen dangers, David ascended to a life of profound responsibility, immense public scrutiny. His days were a relentless cycle of judgment, defense, intricate ritual, and the complex navigation of family and court politics. The crown he wore, though gleaming with power, prestige, and divine anointing, was indeed an exceptionally heavy burden. A weight carried with every sunrise, every difficult decision, every public appearance, and every private prayer. It was a life lived under the constant, scrutinizing gaze of his people, and as the ancient narratives so powerfully tell us, under the vigilant, often demanding eye of the divine. These layers of history, from the mundane struggles of survival to the profound moments of spiritual reckoning, remind us of the enduring resilience of the human spirit. They are stories of challenge and adaptation, of faith and doubt, of building and breaking. Now, as the calming sounds of the past softly dissipate, allow your mind to drift. Release any lingering thoughts of ancient duties or imperial weight. Feel the present moments settle around you, quiet and still. Let the gentle currents of these forgotten ages lull you into a state of deep rest. For tonight, the history has been explored, the past has been revealed, and your journey into tranquil slumber can now begin.